Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On tonight's episode, we'll kick off with an announcement from Will Miles. For 4 bits, we will go over the Gators NFL draft results. Linebacker MALIK Bryant includes Florida in his top 5, and we'll finish up with a popular discussion over the past week here, the NIL tampering issue. We've seen it with Jordan Addison from Pitt. He's been a spark plug for a major conversation occurring across college football, the media landscape right now. But first off, Will, we'll jump right into 2 bits here before, and we'll let you get going with this announcement without any delay.
Yeah, man, we're really excited. So, you came on to Read and Reaction about a year and a half ago, or started at least pushing stuff on the YouTube channel a year ago. We really started working in earnest towards building something. And the next step to doing that is what we're announcing here, which is we're going to be putting out a preview magazine this May. Before Memorial Day, we're going to have that out. And if you're interested, you can head over to readandreaction.com/mag. That's readandreaction.com/mag. You can sign up with your email. And what we'll do is we'll let you know when it's out. We'll give you a coupon code for 20% off because you're giving us information about who's interested. And also, if you're interested in potentially advertising your business in our magazine, you can reach out, will@readandreaction.com. But what the magazine is going to be is it's really going to be a collection of Read and Reaction articles previewing the season. We'll have some expert takes from some people, in Gator media as well. But what you really can expect is more than 100 pages. It's dedicated specifically to the 2022 Florida Gators season. And the reason we're doing it is because we love those preview magazines like Lindy's and Pick Six Previews has a good one that they've got online. But all of those are dedicated to all of the teams. And you've got maybe a page or 2 about your favorite team in that particular preview magazine. And there isn't a space, I don't think, for something where you say, look, I'm going to know everything about my team by the time I'm done reading this, and I can show it to people and show them why Florida's going to be good or show them why Florida's going to be bad, right? I mean, I think we're going to be honest in the magazine. We want to tell people what we think is going to happen, but it's going to be very similar in tone to what you get on the website. But I think a really cool in-depth look at the Gators 2022 season. And again, if you're interested, go over to readandreaction.com/mag. Enter your email address, and then we'll send you a coupon for a discount on the magazine, and also let you know when it's out, and make sure that make sure everybody's aware of it when it comes out. And we'll keep pushing on here too. But we're excited. I mean, this is sort of when you came on, I guess really it was 2 years ago that you and I really started working together. When you came on, we talked about how can we build this into something that is more than just the website. And obviously we've launched Stand Up and Holler, and we're doing this on a weekly basis. And you've added to the website as well, still doing the website, but now this is one more step in sort of what we're trying to build here, and hopefully people come along for the ride.
Yeah, I was absolutely fired. We were pitching ideas to each other in the off season. We're always trying to figure out new angles and everything else to take our approach in a different direction at times. But this idea jumped off the page right away when we started talking about it, because I'm a huge college football nerd. I know most of you, if y'all are tuning in the middle of May here, listen to us talk about Florida Gator football, you're right there with us, I would like to assume. And these magazines have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I run out, and as soon as I can, as soon as they hit the newsstands, you go out and you get as many of those magazines as you can growing up. But it's like Will said, hey, it's cool. I like reading about all of college football. I'm into that. However, you do want to know more than just the 1 to 2 pages on your new team. Maybe with a new hire this year, there'll be a couple Billy Napier articles out there, so maybe there'll be a little more Gator content. But just 100+ pages of pure Florida Gator football content, that's not out there, and that's what I was really excited when we came up with this one, Will.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be a digital magazine. It's going to be something that you get in your email box, the minute you sign up to get it. And I think, I'm obviously biased, but I think it's going to give people some insight into what they can expect. We've got some plays that are going to be diagrammed from Napier's offense and Tony's defense. We've got, we're looking back at the 2021 season and saying, what did Florida do well? What did they not do well? We're taking a look at the roster. We're taking a look at recruiting. We're doing all of that in one place and saying comprehensively, what can you expect when this 2022 season kicks off? And so, the fun part has been, normally in the off season, it's a little bit of a lull. We're trying to figure out, how are we going to, what are we going to talk about? How are we going to stay interested? The bigger problem has been trying to find time to do the writing to get this done. But it's been fun, right? And so you get to a point where you start looking at the schedule, you're looking forward to it, you find little tidbits that you want to share, but you're like, no, I'm not going to share that because I want to hold that back because that's a bigger part of a story I'm trying to tell. And that's really the goal, right? I mean, you and I, we don't have a massive amount of access to the program. Obviously, we've gotten some cachet that's allowed us to have some access in certain areas, but we don't have a ton of access. That's not what we're about at Read and Reaction. What we're really about is trying to help people become smarter fans. We're about trying to tell stories about the program and use stats, use film, use sort of hopefully football knowledge to help sell or to help tell stories about the program and why something might improve or why it might not improve. And so I'm excited. I think it's going to be a little bit of a unique product out there. And I hope, like I said, I hope people come along for the ride. And certainly if you're interested, going over there and signing up early to let us know is really, really helpful. If nothing else, to motivate us to finish it up.
Yeah, that's on the table right now. Hey, I also do want to express gratitude to each and every one of you who, show up every week and watch our show, go to the website and read the articles, because if we didn't feel like we had the audience to do this, we would not put the level of work in that we're putting into this thing. And I just really want to say thank you to everybody out there, Will.
That's a great point. I mean, I've got an intro I started out this whole thing by writing sort of an introduction, just a note about why we had the project. And the project it was almost like people ask me all the time, how do I do this with 4 kids and all the time that we put into it anyway? And now this is an additional project on top of that. How do you put that kind of time in? And the answer is I can't stop. Like the answer is that the relationships that you build through college football, through Twitter, through Facebook in some respects, and really just through going to the games and hanging out at tailgates and getting spending time with brothers and mothers and fathers and sisters and kids and all that sort of stuff is so valuable. And it's something that we don't really get that much in society these days. And so, there is definitely a subset of people, and maybe even a larger than a subset of people, who feel the same way. And so, one of the cool things I'm hoping is that Read and Reaction is going to be doing more and more of this type of stuff, that you and I are going to be spearheading, doing more and more of these types of projects, and that they're going to be centered towards building relationships and around football, obviously, but that's the core of what we're doing. That if we're not, if we're not helping a dad talk to his kid about football, if we're not helping a kid talk to his dad about football, then I'm not sure that we're doing our job. And that's really the goal. And so, like I said, I think I'm excited that this is the first step. This isn't going to be the only step. We're going to have other stuff coming, but I'm excited about where this is going and excited about where it's headed and excited about getting this done and getting it out there for everybody to see.
So one more time, when can people expect it and where can they go to get it?
So it's going to be out before Memorial Day. And if you want to sign up to get information about when it's going to be out, you can go to readandreaction.com/mag. And then certainly if you don't want to sign up and get the discount, you can pay full price, and we will be announcing where it's out on Read and Reaction and here on Stand Up and Holler, and probably on Gators Breakdown, some other things as well when it comes out. So you will know when it comes out. But we wanted to give everybody a heads up that it's coming and sort of why it's coming, because I think it's important.
Let's just be honest. Neither one of us has put together a magazine before. And so we just want to give ourselves a little wiggle room by saying Memorial Day, right? So we're putting a date down on paper for everybody, but just giving ourselves a little wiggle room so that we don't get stuck on a certain day here. So we want to make sure we're delivering the highest quality product possible for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been one of the ethoses of the site, right? Is that we're not going to put garbage up there, that we want to make sure that we're informed. We want to make sure that what we say has a statistical backing. And then we want to make sure that it's fun, hopefully, right? I think one of the things that you and I just enjoy this because we sit there and go back and forth all the time during games and during the off season about all sorts of different stuff that's going on. And that's part of the experience, right? I mean, I look at it and say, this magazine wouldn't be here without you coming on board. It's sort of that yin and yang. You need people to push you. And so you've been able to do that and help move this forward. But part of that also, like you said, the audience, people who have shown up, people who show up all the time, people who comment, even people who comment in a negative way. As long as you buy the preview magazine, I don't care. So, look, you said it earlier and I want to echo it. I really, really appreciate everybody's support. That support is one of the reasons why we've decided to take this step out, put the work in, try to put out a high quality product, and hopefully everybody will agree that that's what they get. And, we look forward to seeing everybody's reaction when it comes out.
Yeah. And looking forward to it. And we look forward to your feedback too, because this is something that like Will said, we're not looking at this as a one-time deal. Hopefully this will be something we carry into next year and maybe even grow it to a point where, hey, maybe even the dream is maybe you see it on a new shelf in Publix or something one day. We'll see. We'll take one step at a time though. All right.
Well, we already asked for that the first time and they turned us down. So if Winn-Dixie's interested, we're on board.
Calling out Publix there. All right. Well, that's it. That's the announcement. We appreciate everybody's support, like we said, and without the audience, this is impossible. And we're very much looking forward to it. We'll absolutely keep you posted on a definitive release date. In the meantime, you can go put your email in and stay in touch. We'll stay in touch about that. All right, well, let's move on to 4 bits here. Talk about the NFL draft this past weekend. Kaiir Elam ends up going in that first round. Buffalo goes up to get their guy. Will, you're the Bills fan here. You still have PTSD over those 13 seconds in Kansas City and Kaiir Elam on that field. I think that was the first thing you said on a text to me was maybe it would add another second or two for Pat Mahomes to have Kaiir Elam out there. But Brandon Beane, the GM in Buffalo, he said we had a good grade on Kaiir and we were down to one player in the first round on our board. While addressing the media after the pick, at that point, it just made sense. He said he plays in the SEC, which is the closest thing to our level. He's gone against some of the top talent in his career, guys that have already been drafted a year ago. We think he's got a high ceiling. He's a younger player, so we feel like he's just got a lot of things that he does well. He's a bigger, longer guy. He's got speed to carry the vertical. Some guys that are running in the high 4.5 struggle. They've got good. They're good in the short area, but they struggle with receivers downfield. We think he can do that. So when you hear he plays in the SEC and that's the closest thing to our level, that's not me saying it. That's not Will saying it. That's an NFL general manager for the Buffalo Bills saying it. Will, you got to love that evaluation of Kaiir Elam. And also, did you happen to catch the Twitter video where he was giving the interview surrounded by the most people I've seen interviewing one person in a room in my entire life?
Well, look, I mean, Buffalo does it right when it comes to loving their players. I mean, you look at a guy like Brandon Spikes who played in New England and played in Buffalo, and Spikes, he acknowledges that he was a Patriot, but you can tell he loved his time in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. That's funny. Even years ago, Jim Kelly got drafted got sent to Buffalo and was really ticked off that he was in Buffalo and ends up being the face of Buffalo for a couple of decades. And I think still lives there. And that special connection that Buffalo has with its team, it's just, they don't have, they got the Sabres, right? But other than that, there's no professional baseball team, and the Bills are the special entity, and the NFL is obviously bigger. It's very similar to the way the Packers are looked at in Green Bay in terms of that relationship between the fans and the team. And so Buffalo is a really cool place, if nothing else, for that. Certainly, now it's sort of on the field. If Buffalo had taken anybody other than the defensive guy, I would have been ticked off because the reality is they've got with Allen at quarterback, they're going to be pretty good regardless of who they got on that side of the ball. They need to make sure they're able to stop, all the guys that they're going to come up against, not just Pat Mahomes, but some of the other guys that they're going to come up against as well. And, what better way to do that than an SEC corner? Look, I don't profess to be an expert at cornerback evaluation, but I didn't see anything a whole lot different on film from LSU's Derek Stingley Jr., who was taken 3rd overall by the Texans, compared to Elam. I think the only thing you could say is that Elam wasn't on the field this year, or at least was on the field and wasn't playing as well as maybe he should have, but that was because he was injured in that Alabama game. There was a deep crossing route that he broke up and hurt his hip, I think, on that play. And so maybe it wasn't quite as good at the end of the year, but 2 years ago, Stingley was injured as well. Didn't play real well, missed a few games as well. So I think Buffalo may have gotten some real value here at this particular spot in the draft. Elam obviously has blazing speed, has, like you mentioned, has covered those guys in the SEC, and now all those guys are in the NFL. So look, he knows what it takes. The question is he going to be able to make the turn? But all the stories you hear coming out of it, right? Sitting in the plane, asking for the playbook before so he could study it on his way up there. Saying all the right things about wanting to be in Buffalo. I think all that stuff reflects well on Elam and also reflects well on the fact that he knows it's a good fit for him there, and that he's going to be, Tre'Davious White's going to be on the other side. So they'll have an opportunity to be a couple of lockdown corners if Elam can turn into who everybody thinks he's going to be.
Well, the next Gator off the board was from another top AFC team. It's weird to talk about top AFC teams just in our lifetime, Will. We're talking about the Bengals and the Bills here. But Zachary Carter goes to the Cincinnati Bengals with the 95th pick in the third round. They love this versatility. That's what they specifically mentioned that when he was drafted. The defensive coordinator runs a 3-4 hybrid scheme, and he said that Carter will start inside and gradually work him away from the ball. He's shown that he can beat guards, but also tackles. The defensive coordinator there for Cincinnati said he's a defensive lineman through and through. He adds urgency to the room. Not that we don't have it. Once he crosses the white line, so he's a tough guy. So they loved his toughness. They loved his versatility. That was a word you heard a lot about him before the draft, and that gets him all the way up into the third round. And this was a guy, Will, who came back last season. This would not have been Zach Carter would not have been a third round pick a year ago. So he did a lot for his stock. Despite a difficult year, he still did a lot for his stock coming back and playing well throughout 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the Bengals play 4-man fronts a lot, which means that if you look at him from a defensive end perspective, he's going to be competing with Trey Hendrickson, who had 14 sacks in 2021, and Sam Hubbard, who had 7 sacks in 2021 for playing time. And I think this is where the experience where he was able to slide inside at Florida 2 years ago when Kyrie Campbell was gone, but also now, last year when they needed guys to slide inside, Carter is able to rush the passer from the inside. And unfortunately, Florida didn't have enough guys to be able to use that as often as I would have liked to have seen him use it last year. But his ability to pass rush, his ability to get in the backfield, his ability to get tackles for loss from a nose tackle position or a defensive tackle position means that he's really valuable if he can hold up against the run, because you think about like those Giants teams that gave the Patriots fits when Eli Manning was beating Tom Brady. The reason those teams were giving Tom Brady fits was because they were able to slide Justin Tuck on the inside. And all of a sudden now you got pass rushers at all 4 positions coming after Brady, but still able to stop the run. The NFL is going more and more and more away from the run, more having running backs who are out there in space where you throw to them as opposed to just, a power game. What that means, you can get away with smaller guys on the inside. And so Carter, though not small, is going to be a smaller guy on the inside. But that, I think, is where he's going to get playing time early on. Is you're going to have Hendrickson and Hubbard on the outside. You're going to have Carter slide to the inside. Now you've got 3 pass rushers, or even a 4th pass rusher if you bring somebody else in there at nose tackle as well. 4 pass rushers who are coming after the quarterback. And, considering some of the issues that Cincinnati was okay, but they weren't great last year. It was a great run to the Super Bowl, but they weren't a great team. And having Carter in there, I think, will make a big deal or make a big difference. And then, like you said, I mean, he is a success story of a guy who probably is an undrafted free agent if he goes pro last year. Instead, he comes back all of a sudden. Now he's a 3rd round pick, going to make more than $1 million, right, over the next couple of years. So, real life changing money, and congratulations. Cause I think we saw the potential, but needed to see it more consistently. And then he came out and had a consistent season for Florida, and was able to parlay that into getting drafted by the Bengals.
So Zach Carter goes to Cincinnati with the 95th pick. On the 107th pick in the 4th round, the Houston Texans selected Dameon Pierce, the running back. They had also added Marlon Mack from Indianapolis this offseason, so you expect those two to potentially compete. Nick Caserio, the GM in Houston, said of Pierce, he plays with a lot of joy. He plays with a lot of fight. He plays with a lot of toughness, and his personality, I would say, transfers over to the football field. Kind of played a little bit of a rotation down there at Florida this past year. So they had him and another back. They rotated in. What's the reason for that? That's ultimately up to the coaching staff for them to determine how they want to deploy their players. But talking about a guy that's 5'9", 217 pounds, that's built strong, low to the ground, has good contact balance, good lower body strength, good lateral quickness, and maybe lacks a little top end speed and has decent hands. So that sums up Dameon Pierce very well. It also sums up a little shot there at Dan Mullen for why isn't this guy playing more? So for those of you who are frustrated with it, that last year, Nick Caserio from the Houston Texans seems to have agreed with you, but I'm sure he probably doesn't mind that there's fewer carries on his running back coming into the league.
Yeah, I mean, Pierce is going to be a starting running back by the time this year ends, right? I mean, I think you look at Mack, he averaged 3.6 yards per attempt last year. You got Rex Burkhead behind him, 3.5 yards per attempt in 2021. And those are the two guys he's got to beat out for the starting job, which means if Pierce is going to be a starter in this league, I'm not sure he could have landed in a better spot. This isn't a position where somebody drafted him as a backup to, you know, an established running back. This isn't something where he got drafted and is going to be in some sort of platoon. If he's significantly better, if he's better than Mack and better than Burkhead, he's going to be the starter and he's going to get a lot of carries. So from that standpoint, it's a good fit for Pierce. The only problem I have is that the Texans are kind of a dumpster fire when it comes to the front office and the way things have been run over the last few years. You had Bill O'Brien trying to get himself fired and they promoted him to general manager. And then, you know, they've had some stuff with the team chaplain who's sort of gained more and more power, or I guess the former Patriots team chaplain who gained a lot of power within the Texans front office. I know there's been some unhappiness there about the way things have been run and the way decisions have been made. So, you know, you hope that doesn't impact Pierce in his career. At the same time, I think, you know, talent's going to win out, and Mack's an okay player. Burkhead's an okay player. Even if Pierce is just an okay player, I think he's going to get an opportunity to start. And what more can you ask? I mean, you know, if you're a third round pick coming out where you're not coming in, you know, he could have been drafted by like a team like the Cowboys, right? Where they got Ezekiel Elliott sitting there at the number one running back position, and Tony Pollard, who was actually pretty good at the number two position. That's not what happened to Pierce. Pierce is coming into a situation where if he's good enough, he's going to win the starting job, and that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, Lovie Smith, the head coach down in Houston now. Lovie Smith likes to run the football and play defense. You know that opportunity will be there for Pierce. So great opportunity for a great Gator. Looking forward to seeing him develop in his career. Although I'm a Jags fan, just take it easy 2 times a year, Damian. All right, just take it easy. Linebacker Jeremiah Moon ends up. So that was it for the draft. 3 Gators taken this year, Will. Linebacker Jeremiah Moon ends up signing with the Baltimore Ravens. Tyro Truesdale goes to the Giants, along with Antonio Valentino. 2 defensive tackles from Gainesville go together up to New York to the Giants training camp there. Malik Davis ends up with the Dallas Cowboys. That could be an interesting pick. He was a guy that we talked about as an undrafted free agent that could have an impact for sure, especially you look at the preseason. You mentioned Ezekiel Elliott. How many preseason games that guy really going to play? So Malik Davis should get his opportunity in the preseason to show what he's got to the Dallas Cowboys. And last but not least, Gene DeLance going up to Chicago to play for the Bears as an undrafted free agent. So that wraps up the NFL draft process with the Florida Gators. Will, you got any final comments on the undrafted guys?
Yeah, the only thing I thought was interesting is I looked at the Cowboys, and I was really surprised to see that Ezekiel Elliott caught 47 balls last year, and Tony Pollard caught 39. So they are very much involved in terms of throwing the ball to their running backs, and that fits Malik Davis to a T. And in fact, you start looking at size and weight, he's pretty close to Tony Pollard when it comes to those sort of things. And so he's a little bit of an insurance policy, because I think Elliott and Pollard are going to get the lion's share of the carries and the lion's share of the receptions. At the same time, the scheme fits what Malik Davis does pretty well. If something were to happen to Pollard, or if something were to happen to Elliott and someone needed to slide in to that position, you look at the other guys on the roster, Rico Dowdle, Jaquan Hardy, those guys didn't have any catches at all last year. Aaron Champlin from Harvard was a running back who was also signed as a UFA. He was primarily a runner last season at Harvard, only caught 16 balls. So you think about the way the offense runs in Dallas, the fact that they clearly target their running backs in the passing game. And then Malik Davis is the only guy other than those top 2 who really has shown that in college, or shown that, you know, in the pros in the case of Hardy and Dowdle. And so, yeah, I think you might get an opportunity there, right? I mean, undrafted free agents, it's hard to latch on, right? Those guys don't necessarily latch on. A lot of times those become practice squad players and that sort of stuff. But the other thing is that running back is such a physical position. You know, one hit and you're out for the rest of the season, and you take a lot of hits. And so, you know, it's entirely possible that you got to go deep on the depth chart at some point throughout the year. Davis will probably get an opportunity to show some stuff during the preseason. So even if he doesn't latch on with the Cowboys, chances are he'll get a look, and some other teams might be able to pry him away if in fact he shows some stuff during the preseason.
Yeah, fully expect him to be on a roster somewhere this fall in the NFL. Congrats to all the Gators who either signed contracts this week with NFL teams as undrafted free agents or were drafted. We'll be rooting for you at the next level. Let's go on to 6 bits here. Orlando Jones, linebacker Malik Jones. Malik Bryant, got Jones there twice there. Orlando Jones linebacker Malik Bryant, 5-star prospect, who will be committing on July 23rd, announced his top 5 schools this past week, listing Florida along with Alabama, Miami, USC, and the Central Knights there. Will Andrew Ivins from 24/7 Sports said he has an initial burst that tends to cause plenty of issues for the opposing offensive tackles. Also owns a valuable experience in pass coverage, having been asked in the past to stick with much quicker wide receivers coming out of the slot. And he started as a freshman in Florida's highest classification before spending the next 2 years producing at National Powerhouse in IMG Academy. He's now back at Orlando Jones for that senior year. And he said he might be best suited for a 3-4 look, but you can also find a role in a 4-3 front, potentially even as an off-ball linebacker. Bryant, this is one of those recruits we've had circle, right? We want to see Billy lock up the state. This is a critical recruitment. You're seeing Miami and USC in there along with Alabama. Who are you worried about out of that group the most, Will?
I mean, I think you're always worried about Alabama, right? That's the team you look at and say, you know, if you're a high schooler who's 17 or 18 years old, the only thing you know is Alabama being a dominant power in college football. And so, you know, not a whole lot of people remember the Tim Tebow years of 6, 7, and 8 back, you know, given, you know,
not a lot of 18-year-old people. Not
a lot of 18-year-old people remember that, right? and the dynasty that took over was Saban after that, and so everybody thinks of Alabama. So that's the threat, right? And again, Orlando, really, really close to Florida. NIL, you got all the stuff with Hugh Heathcock that we talked about last week, and the money that's floating around, and supposedly this war chest. Brian is ranked 35th nationally, so just barely out of that 5-star ranking on the 24/7 Sports composite, but a very, very valuable player. You know, the difference between a guy ranked 30th and 35th is relatively minimal. So yeah, Alabama's who I'd be concerned about.
Well, I saw Miami and USC on there as well. Miami's obviously making a lot of noise in the NIL space, especially. The guys from Orlando, he's going to have Central on there. USC, it's across the country. I know they're making noise with all types of recruiting efforts here with USC, but I'll tell you what, I expect this to be a race between Florida, Alabama, and Miami. And I'll tell you, this is a guy, if Billy Napier beats out Alabama and what's going on down there at Miami, I think that's a big statement in this 2023 recruiting class. And unlike our projections, we've been talking a lot about the NIL, where it's advantageous for some of these higher rated recruits to wait. This guy's already set his commitment date on July 23rd. There's a few other guys out of the Orlando area who are committing the same day, right? They're all doing it together.
Yeah, I think Peyton Kirkland's doing it, and then I can't remember who the third one was, but it's an elite guy as well.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I think people shouldn't get overly concerned about Napier's class yet. You get Bryant and Kirkland and a couple other guys to commit. By the time July 23rd comes around, we'll forget about any, sort of this dead period where we haven't had any commits. Obviously you got to hit on these guys, and that's the deal. But we know when the date's coming, and just
that's
like
definitely a date to circle, right? That July 23rd date's definitely a date to circle.
Well, I mean, look, the Florida defense hasn't stopped anybody or gotten pressure on anybody in 2 years. So any guy that you can line up on the edge and get real pressure is significant. Now, is he going to be doing that next year? I don't know, but Brenton Cox probably isn't here next year, so he's going to have an opportunity if he comes in to be able to do that pretty early on. And look, I think Napier talked about NIL being a portion of what you sell. Another portion of what you sell is that you're going to be able to play. Right. Like Florida is going through a lot of turnover and a lot of upheaval on its roster right now. And so, evaluating everything, obviously, but there's also going to be quite a few guys who end up leaving. There'll probably be guys who leave through the transfer portal after this season as well. There's going to be spots that open up and playing time that's available. So that is the selling point to me, beyond just NIL and sort of, which coaches to get along with best and that sort of stuff. One of the selling points is if you go to Alabama, you're going to have to sit there for a couple of years before you get in there, unless you're Will Anderson. Come to Florida and develop while you're getting on the field early and show everybody what you can do. Is that a convincing argument? I don't know, but that's what I'd be selling. I'd be selling playing time.
Well, July 23rd is definitely going to be a date to pay attention to for the recruiting landscape at the University of Florida here. Let's move on to $1, Will. And We'll stay in the recruiting world here. Jordan Addison, the Blitnikoff Award winner for the best wide receiver in the nation out of Pittsburgh last year, he entered the transfer portal, and it sparked a ton of conversation around tampering issues. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of smoke that he's going to end up at USC. There were a lot of rumors about what he's getting to go to USC. I'm not going to talk about those rumors specifically because I haven't seen any data, actual proof on anything, number one. And number two, if he's getting what he's getting, that would be unbelievable. But I got to say, this has been an interesting discussion to me because of one thing. I think a lot of people who have been open-minded, there's been that segment of college football fans who look at this NIL thing and go, the sport's going, this is garbage. I don't like the direction of the sport. And there's another segment of the fans who have looked at it and go, like, it's a positive. There's making enough money now. This isn't back in the day where Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler are making $30,000 a year to coach college football. There's $50+ million coming in on the TV contract alone. These coaches are making outrageous sums of money. It's time for the players to get a cut. And I think a lot of people have looked at it like that. However, this looks to me, and we have no evidence of this. I'm just saying it looks to me like the man was talking to somebody at another school, decided to enter the portal because he's got something set up on the other side. No evidence of that. But that is almost outright free agency. And I feel differently, Will, about the right to jump in the transfer portal, the right to get paid to play football in college, versus are we going to have bidding wars every single offseason if you have a good player at a position? Like, are schools like Pittsburgh and West Virginia, are they just doomed to serve as the minor leagues essentially for Ohio State, USC, Texas, and Alabama, Georgia, Florida? Is that going to happen, or are we eventually going to get to a point where there's some guardrails on this and we're not so much Wild West and there's some rules around what you can actually offer and how much you can actually jump around?
No, I mean, I think it's a little bit of an overreaction to look at the way things are now and say this is the way things will always be, because what's going to happen is that right now no one had anything, right? And now you're having to retain guys you already recruited and essentially negotiate against everybody else, but you already got them to come to your school and they've already sort of shown what they could do, right? So if you've got a guy who's shown at Pittsburgh that he can be a good wide receiver or even an elite wide receiver, and USC says, hey, we'd like you, that's fine. The way these NIL contracts are written, at least the one that was shared with The Athletic, is that if you go to that school and you sign that contract, they own your NIL rights. So technically you then couldn't sell your NIL rights to another school and transfer, right? So the way the contract is written, it's written in a way to prevent that from happening. The problem is that nobody at any school has a contract right now or had a contract prior to this being implemented. And so you're having to what's the right word? You're having to put on top of the existing framework that sits there. You're taking this new framework and putting it on top of the existing framework. And so it feels like there's all sorts of moving parts, because there are, but those moving parts are going to stop, assuming that the contracts are written in a way that incentivizes people to stay at the schools that they're at. Now the problem with all of this is that the NIL is this weird catch-22, because it is pay for play. No one would give $5 for these people to endorse their stuff if they weren't big time college football players. And so their ability to sell their name, image, and likeness is directly tied to their ability to play football. And more than that, their ability to sell product to people, say, in Gainesville, Florida, is tied to their willingness to play for the University of Florida. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is. And so the idea that we're going to pretend like, the guy is driving in the example of Anthony Richardson, that he's driving a Dodge for Gainesville Dodge, and that has nothing to do with the fact that he's on the University of Florida football team, is unrealistic, right? And he would not be nearly as valuable to Gainesville Dodge if he decided to transfer to LSU, right? He'd be very valuable to a car dealer in Baton Rouge at that point. So what there's been an acknowledgement that there's a black market, or that there has been a black market in the past, which is why the NIL has come about. But what's happened is a lot of really smart people have gotten together and said, how can we collectively bring this money together to incentivize people to come here? But the problem with it all is that, the $5 million that Hathcock raised is great. That's great for Florida. It's probably great for recruiting and great for the program. But the reason it takes $5 million is because these guys play football. And so their value is inexorably tied to playing football at that school. And the idea that you can separate those things, I think, is a little bit of a fool's errand. And so you've still got a little bit of a black market here, because you're putting restrictions on what people can earn, or how they can earn it, or how it's like, oh, people are cheating. Are they really? Or are they just basically, is it a wink, wink deal? But that wink, wink deal is only there because somebody else decided to put restrictions on a market that, if you just had it as a free market, would be a legitimate free market transaction. And, you look at the NFL, guys don't transfer from one team to another every year because they have a contract, and NIL is introducing contracts. And so as those contracts get signed, I think we'll see less and less movement. But, the problem is it's not the University of Florida signing Anthony Richardson to a contract. It's not, well, other than his letter of intent, right? But it's not Florida signing him to that NIL deal. It's somebody outside of Florida signing him, outside of the university, signing him to that deal. Same thing in any other school in the country. And so those things are slightly disconnected, but they're absolutely interrelated. And I don't know how you separate those two.
I'm a free market guy in most situations, so I almost hate saying this, but I look at the Addison situation specifically, where you have a top-notch wide receiver in college football at Pitt. First off, when's the last time we were able to say that at Pitt? Larry Fitzgerald? It's been a minute, right? So that's not a thing that gets churned out year in, year out. Great wide receivers at Pitt. So it would have been cool for him to stick around and play ball there, and Pittsburgh gets to have one of the better players in the country on their team, and they get to do something interesting this fall. But you got USC coming in potentially making an offer, allegedly. All right, we don't know it's USC for sure. He might end up at a different school. He's just in the portal. It's just heavily rumored that it's USC making the move here. But USC right now, I don't think they're breaking any rules necessarily, because I don't know if there's all that many rules to break. I know there's issues with you can't, like you said, there's some of the collectives, they can't pay guys for playing football at the school. All right, so what, like, we're getting to a point where we're being ridiculous with, it's a level of semantics that's just on borderlines on stupid at that point.
Well, and there's no way to restrict it, right? I saw Darren Heitner had something on earlier, or had something.
That's who we need. We need to get him on here talking about this.
Well, there you go. But I mean, the thing that I saw was essentially, if you try to restrict what these guys can make, you're immediately going to get lawsuits. And the lawsuits are going to contend restriction of trade, not in, like, to me, it was pretty.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it was pretty obvious from the way that Kavanaugh wrote the opinion in the Supreme Court ruling that sort of led to all this NIL stuff, that that the justices are ready to basically overturn all of this stuff and make the NCAA or make these schools give contracts to their players, that this is a business and you pay your employees. That is where this is headed. And all this is doing is sort of, the schools have figured out a way to offshore paying their employees through this NIL instead of having to pay out of the TV money that they're collecting. Mm-hmm. Now, Dave Wonderlick it was Bud Davis had a really interesting visual on Twitter this past week where he was sort of looking at the potential war chest versus the actual war chest, because, schools are going to have to figure out how to reallocate the money that was coming into the athletic program or into the football program and have that more in a collective, so you have more money to pay these guys. So what are we really doing then? I mean, what we're really doing is that we're just, the bean counting is it's an efficiency game for an accountant to figure out how to count the beans. But at the end of the day, the money is still flowing from boosters to the program. And in this case, the players just get a cut. I don't have a problem with that. Again, I think I said this on last week's episode. I said I'd be perfectly okay with something that said, if you take NIL money, you have to sit out a year if you transfer. If you don't take NIL money, then you can transfer freely. And that's just part of the standard contract for NIL that you enter into, right? And so there's a penalty if you accept money to play. And then you set up tampering rules, right? Where, look, if it's found that a separate school called somebody while they're still on the roster before they've entered the transfer portal, then that's tampering, and there are penalties for that or whatever. You're gonna, if you want to tamp this down, you're gonna have to set some rules.
Good luck enforcing that, though.
Well, the NFL has the same problem, right? The NFL can't enforce that either.
Yeah,
and this is part of the problem, right? Is if somebody says, wink, wink, I'll give you money for your NIL rights, and you can go to whatever school you want, but your NIL rights are only going to be valuable in Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, okay, what are my options then as a player? Like, I guess I can just collect the money, go wherever I want, and not do any commercials. But
what about for that guy who goes to Knoxville, Tennessee, it doesn't work out for him. He gets benched his sophomore year for an incoming freshman that beats him out for the job. Can he take his rights and go? Like, where he tried to live up to his end of the deal. I think we're going to get in a lot of sticky situations like that. I would love to see performance on the field rewarded and loyalty to the program rewarded, and you have to incentivize it. So I'm not saying you come up with a ton of rules, but like there needs to be a level of discipline that you don't go out and pay a hotshot recruit a ton of money, that you pay the third-year linebacker in the program that money, and recruits get, maybe you cap it off on recruiting. I don't know. There's 100 different directions this thing could go.
Well, that's sort of what I mean when I say that we're taking a current system and we're superimposing a new system on top of it. And so there are a lot of moving parts, because those moving parts are going to slow down as people start to understand exactly the best way to take advantage of this. And you and I got really excited about Barton Simmons going to Vanderbilt and what he was going to do with recruiting there. The reason is we sat there and said, he's going to do something different. He's not going to sit there and go, I'm at Vanderbilt, I'm going to try and recruit like Florida and like all these other schools and end up 60th and then just get beaten like a drum. I'm going to change my approach. And I think one of the interesting things about NIL is that different schools are going to have to take different approaches because of the money that's involved, but also because that not everybody has an equal war chest. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality of something like Major League Baseball, right? I mean, the New York Yankees and the New York Mets have way more money to spend than, say, the Oakland Athletics. That's what's coming to college football. Now, that doesn't mean that Oakland never competes.
That already exists to a degree. So for people who are acting like it's true, Texas is always going to spend more money than Purdue and Northwestern, guys. It's always been the case. It always will be the case.
The difference is I do think the money is bigger now, but I think that's actually not because the black market was suppressing value. Well, yeah, I think what's happened is that people, very much like gambling, people who would have sat out giving money to players where it was given in a McDonald's bag by Jeremy Pruitt to somebody allegedly in Knoxville. Like, the money that went in the McDonald's bag had to come from someone who was willing to, one, act unethically, and two, not really be guaranteed that his or her money was going to be used in the way that the coach said it was going to be used. In this case, now the NIL, because it's above board, because it's legal, now you've got an aspect of things where I think you're going to have more people willing to contribute to those sorts of things in order to benefit the players. And so if that takes money away from the program, moves it towards the players, I think in many respects that's a good thing. You mentioned that you're a free market person. I am too, but I'm a free market person within the framework of what's best for the organization as well. And so the NFL is not a free market system. It's a system that the players agreed to in a collective bargaining agreement with the owners. I think that's probably what ends up coming forward. The issue there then is the players are going to have to be very careful not to get taken advantage of, because guys in, the NCAA conference, or I'm sorry, like the SEC president, Greg Sankey, he's conference commissioner, Greg Sankey. He has a long view of what the SEC needs to be that a player can't afford to have, because the player has to get the maximum amount of money he can get today. And, legitimately isn't going to worry about where the SEC is 8 years from now. And so you see that in the NFL too, right? Where the average career is 2 or 3 years. And so the players oftentimes get taken behind the woodshed in these collective bargaining agreements. That'll be the danger, is that and NIL in some ways has given power to the players in a way I didn't necessarily anticipate. And that might be a good thing, because maybe that allows them to have a little bit of leverage when it comes to collective bargaining. And so they get a deal that's fair, rather than what if Northwestern tried to unionize a few years ago, and if that had gone through, and if the National Labor Relations Board had allowed all these other teams to unionize as well, then they would have been collectively bargaining with like a $0 baseline and no real power. And the money wouldn't have already been diverted from the schools to the players. In this case, I do wonder, like, if you're Alabama and you're getting all this money through endowments and all these people who are contributing, and Alabama gets to control the money and where it goes and build the facilities and all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, people who were giving to that are now giving to an Alabama collective. That certainly helps the football program. But does that help Alabama maximize revenue? And I'm not sure that the answer is yes. And so these schools may find that the money gets diverted in a way they don't like, because they don't control it. And I suspect that as the schools want to control that as much as they can, that there's going to be some sort of collective bargaining, and we're going to end up with something that looks similar to what the NFL looks like. Maybe not perfect, but the NFL is not perfect, but I think it's going to look something like that, where you're going to have contracts, and the contracts are going to have terms, and those terms are going to have to be completed. And so there maybe in the contract is, if you fall behind, if you fall to third string or something, or you don't get enough playing time or something like that, you have an opt-out, and then you can go someplace else. And those are all negotiable points when you're deciding where you're going to go. And the good news is that in college, the players will have decent leverage when they're recruits, because there's no draft, right? In the NFL, the rookies have no leverage because there's a draft and there are salary slots. But in this case, you suspect that won't be the case, because the point at which a player has the most leverage in his career when it comes to college football is like February 1st. It's like 3 days before signing day is when that guy has the most leverage possible. And so, look, these guys are using it. And I don't begrudge the guys who are sitting on the team saying, well, I didn't get paid. But that's really just a function of when this came to be, right? And so, if I'm Billy Napier and I'm building a program, if there's a senior who's a great player, but who isn't part of what I'm building 2 or 3 years from now, I'm probably not willing to pay that guy as much as some other program who needs that senior just to get over the hump. That's the reality. And that's a market working. It's probably not working in the way that Florida fans would want in that particular case, but it's working because Napier's having to value his players based on the size of his pool of money and decide what to do with it. And I'm talking about this as though Napier's distributing the money, right? And technically he's not. And this goes back to the thing I said originally, which is that this is a weird incestuous relationship between the collectives and between anybody who wants an NIL deal, really, and the school. And so it's not really a free market. It's a restricted market. And one of the reasons that then makes it feel dirty is because you're sitting there looking at it going, well, no one really knows what the rules are. The rules are different in different places. And the players, rightly so, look at the coaches who leave after a year and, bail on the program because they get a better deal and go, well, why wouldn't I do that? I mean, look, their mentors have shown them that this is how you act. So I don't think we should be surprised when they act that way.
Billy Napier just signed a fat $51 million contract this offseason, so I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for the guy here. But imagine jumping into this job at Florida, the biggest microscope you've ever been under in your career. You have to rebuild the program quickly. There's expectations to win almost immediately. I think we're going to be a little bit chill in 2022 overall, but Florida fans, we are not notorious for our patience. We are known for other things. On top of having to rebuild the program in your image, recruit the guys you want to recruit, elevate the recruiting game at the school to a place where it hasn't been in about a decade and a half. You're also being expected to keep up with these lightning speed changes in NIL, forming new collectives. The Gator Guard's brand new. The Gator Collective just started last year. I mean, to track all of that stuff on top of what you do. But that's also why, Will, even though if everything might be a blur right now for Billy Napier overall, you got to have confidence when you read about the level of organization that this guy puts into a program, and that this is not a coach that's just going by the seat of his pants and he's just a coach just drawing up plays in the dirt. This guy sounds super organized, super on top of things. And if he doesn't have the firm grasp of it right now, he will develop it within the next year or two. And you can be certain that I look at this as maybe an advantage for Florida versus some other programs that might not be as organized going down the road.
Well, I mean, look, I think Florida has a lot going for it. I mean, the Gators obviously have a pretty big war chest. They obviously have an extremely large alumni base that cares about football. And they have a passionate fan base that also cares about football. And so you start putting all of those things together and you go, yeah, absolutely. Like Florida has advantages. And then you tie in with that, the organization that Napier seems to be building. And you say, okay, there's no, and I've said this all offseason, there's no excuse for Napier not to recruit at an elite level, given what we know about the conditions at Florida. And yeah, I mean, it's his first big job and so there obviously, there's always risk associated with that. But, you look at a guy's resume who's worked with Dabo Swinney, who's worked with Nick Saban, who spent 4 years building a program at a group of 5 school, and now gets to a Power 5 school and decided to turn down programs like Auburn because he was waiting for something like this to open up. Well, it opens up, you get your chance. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, hey, we expect you to deliver. And I think Napier expects to deliver, right? Nobody goes into this job expecting to fail. And so I think one of the interesting things is that when we saw Jim McElwain or we saw Dan Mullen bristle at the questions coming from the fan base, I think that says something about their personality specifically, which is that, these fans are questioning us. And we'll see. I know we've seen Saban bristle at the Alabama fan base sometimes, but the guy's won like 6 national championships. So I kind of understand
he's usually scolding them for leaving early while they're up by 50 points.
But that's the thing, right? I can understand why he would get frustrated at that. Right. Yeah. Because when they question him after one loss, it's like, oh, it's time for him to go on the message boards. It's like, okay, really? Like just about anybody else would take him. So I get that, but very rarely do you hear Saban sort of bristle at the expectations. Right. He'll bristle at people leaving early. He'll bristle at it not being fun anymore and that sort of stuff. But you don't hear him bristle too much about the expectations because he knows what the expectations are. And quite honestly, those are his expectations. So, when he goes out and, when he goes out and blasts his wide receivers during the offseason for not being prepared when it came time in the national championship game for them to come in, like he's doing that from the standpoint of my expectations are we're winning a championship and that everybody's on that bus with me. And if you're not on the bus, get off. Right. And we have seen some of those wide receivers transfer from Alabama this offseason who were in there. And so, look, I am interested to see what happens with Napier when it comes to that, because I think in many cases how he handles the expectations is going to tell us more about Napier than anything else that we've heard thus far. Because if it comes to where he's like bristling when people are questioning his play call choices and things like that, it's going to be like, look, that means we have higher expectations than you do. And that's a problem. Right now, once you've won 3-4 championships and you want to admonish me about the criticism, then I'm good with it. But until you've won an SEC championship, like the expectation should be that things are going to be humming under you to build this program, that you're going to build it in the way other people have built it and, built their programs and all those sorts of things. So I'm interested to see, right? I think I think people should be confident in what Napier has said. But I don't think we've seen anything yet that confirms that what he says is going to translate into exactly what we want to see. And so, look, we already talked about Malik Bryant. If Bryant comes to Gainesville, along with a bunch of other guys, Kamani McLean and some of these other 5-stars we've talked about, he flips some guys, he brings in a top 3 class. I'm going to praise him as much as I possibly can, because I think he's building the program on a foundation that's necessary to be successful. But there aren't any excuses anymore, I mean, for years it's been, well, we don't have the facilities. And, well,
Right.
we don't have the indoor practice facility. And, well, we don't have the recruiting budget. And, well, we don't have the right personnel on the staff. And, well, we don't cheat like the other guys do. And it's been that over and over and over again. Well, now you have a giant NIL war chest that's public. You've got a big collective that's behind the scenes guaranteeing this money to people, right? The money is in an account that can then be guaranteed. So you have a selling point there. You came in saying it was a talent acquisition business. You've brought all these guys on campus who have these high recruiting profiles. You've sent out the emojis with the sunglasses on them without a commit coming afterwards. Look, there are no excuses. And so I hope Billy Napier succeeds. I think he's got the ability to do so. I believe in coaches who not only say that process is important, but follow a process. And Napier definitely fits that mold. But look, end of the day, you got to deliver, and there aren't any excuses to not deliver, which means it's a yes or no question at the end of the day, and we'll know soon enough.
What's crazy is we've been talking about these big NIL topics as they come up throughout the offseason, Will. And I feel like every time we have the discussion, it's down a new road. And it's not that you learn anything like more about the same thing that you're talking about. It's just a completely new avenue that's opened up. And you're like, where did that come from? It's incredible what's going on in college sports right now. Incredible as in everything's just hyper speed and people are adjusting by the moment. But, for those of you who don't love all the developments that are going on right now, just be patient. I think things will come to a head at some point, and there'll be some guardrails at some point to maybe have some level of consistency across the board so that USC is not playing a different game than Pitt or something like that. So that's what I think you need to see eventually, but I think it'll also take some time to get there overall.
Yeah. And again, I mean, look, we've always rooted for laundry. Right. I mean, if Tim Tebow had gone to Alabama, I'd hate Tim Tebow, right? Because he didn't come to my school. And the reality is that's still going to exist. So people who are like, this is ruining college football, I don't think that's true. I think by the time the ball gets kicked off, we're going to have is one more argument about why one school is beating the pants off of another, irrespective. I mean, look, there were plenty of people who accused those Urban Meyer teams of being dirty and accused them of cheating. And whether they did or not, I think is a different story. But to believe that there wasn't any money that passed hands with those recruiting classes he was bringing in is probably pretty naive. And so, there's always going to be that sort of back and forth in terms of who's finding the edge, who's cutting corners, and who's really sort of pushing the limits of these different rules. And that's what we're seeing is people are pushing the limits on these new rules. And it's, to me, it's fascinating because college football has became stagnant over the last decade with Saban just dominating and it basically being Alabama Clemson every year. And every year we're having some discussion about who can break in. And, oh, look, Ohio State made it in. And now you got these three teams that are playing. Oh, look, Notre Dame made the playoff. They're going to get beat by 50 in the first round. Awesome. And that was basically what college football has been for the past decade. Not a lot of surprises, not a lot of development. So NIL may make the rich get richer. I think it might give opportunities for some of these poorer teams but teams that are not traditional powers to have an opportunity. I think I mentioned last week, Michael Vick in 99 for Virginia Tech. You get a guy of his quality. Cam Newton is the only guy to deliver a national championship to a team that didn't have elite recruiting in the SEC since Saban took over. So those types of players have the ability to raise up the level of play of some of these other teams. Well, so if you're a Utah, or if you're an Oregon, or if you're a Wisconsin, or you're,
Wisconsin, good example. When Russell Wilson went there for a year, remember that
yeah.
They haven't had that type of quarterback there since.
I mean,
they're not usually known for that elite quarterback, but they're also a program that's usually always very good, always on the brink. And if you put an elite quarterback in a Wisconsin uniform, more often than not, that'd be a borderline college football playoff contender.
Yeah. And, so here's the deal. Some of those teams, if they allocate their funds appropriately, might have an ability to compete in a way they haven't been able to compete before. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to compete on a year-to-year basis with Michigan and Ohio State, but can they time it to where they know their defense is going to be experienced And then maybe a year before that, they decide they're going to go all in with a big NIL deal for a 5-star quarterback. And then that guy is a starting true sophomore with a ferocious defense. And all of a sudden you've got a team that has national championship or at least playoff goals and aspirations in a way that they just wouldn't have been able to do before. Maybe, I don't know. Again, I think, there are smart people out there who are going to find ways to find every edge they can. And it's no longer going to be about necessarily just planning. What do I do in the red zone? What do I do inside the 10? What do I do in between the 20s? That'll still be an important part of what goes on. But another part of that will be, how do I acquire talent? How do I best utilize my resources? How do I make sure that I have timed bringing in the talent well enough so that everything can gel all at one time and I can have a championship team? That'll all be part of the picture as well. And so, is Alabama still going to be good? Absolutely. But is Alabama going to be good because Nick Saban's their head coach? Yeah, that's part of it too. So, look, it's a new era. I get it. I understand why people have some trepidations about it. I do too, right? Like there's something about knowing exactly what the path to a championship is that makes it interesting to watch a guy like Napier take over. But there was also something about knowing what it takes to get to a championship that made the last 2 years of the Mullen era really kind of anticlimactic, because we really kind of knew where that was going to end up. And especially towards the end of last year, we knew exactly where that ended up, which is there was no hope of a championship without a change. And hopefully this will give more teams an ability to at least every once in a while rise up. And we'll see if that's true. Otherwise, about 5 years from now, we'll have a 40-team Super League. That's the ACC, the SEC, and a couple of teams from the Big Ten they pick off. And, we'll have great games every Saturday.
Looking forward to seeing what direction this goes. In the meantime, I'm going to enjoy hate watching USC again. So it'll be good to have the Trojans back on the list of teams you like to hate watch on a week-to-week basis. They might be the most hated team in college football coming into college football in a long time, Will. That'll be fun to watch.
I don't know what you're talking about. Lincoln Riley seems like a nice dude. Seems like he'd never stab anybody in the back.
Hey, he's not taking the LSU job. We know that for sure. That was a great all-time press conference right there. All right, that's all we got tonight. That was an extended discussion for $1 there, but again, crazy times in NIL world, worth talking about, worth keeping up with. That's all we got tonight. Will, you got anything? Closing thoughts?
No, just again, thanks to everybody for your support. Really appreciate it. If you want to support us more, you can go over to patreon.com/readandreaction. We really appreciate the people over there who've supported us. And then, like I said earlier, to start this off, you go to readandreaction.com/mag, sign up with your email. We'll give you information about the magazine that's coming out, and we're excited for everybody to see it and would love to hear your feedback once it comes out. So just really, really, really appreciate everybody supporting us out there.
Yep, and we'll keep you posted on the magazine coming up here in the next couple episodes as we go through May. For Will Miles, I'm Nick Knudsen. Thanks again for joining Stand Up and Holler. We'll see you all next week. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel. Join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week. And check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.